Professor Blue stood before his class of alien students at the Galactic Academy of Military History. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he looked at the young beings from different planets sitting in front of him. Today's lesson was special. It was about the species that changed how the galaxy thought about war forever. Today, he said, moving his tall blue body across the front of the classroom, we will learn about humans. More importantly, we will learn why they are banned from all galactic wars. The students shifted in their seats. Some had extra arms, others had scales, and a few glowed softly in different colors. They had all heard stories about humans, but none knew the real truth. A student named Rock, chosen because his skin looked like granite, raised one of his 3 hands. Professor, I heard humans are soft and weak. How could they be dangerous enough to get banned? Professor Blue touched the screen on his desk, and a hologram of Earth appeared in the middle of the room. That's what everyone thought at first. Let me tell you how we learned we were wrong. The professor began his story. 50 years ago, the galaxy was different. 2 powerful alien groups, the Bright Empire and the Dark Coalition, were fighting for control of important space routes and planets rich in rare minerals. Neither side was winning, and the war had gone on for 20 years. Then they found Earth. Both sides thought humans would be easy to recruit. Humans weren't as strong as many aliens, couldn't breathe in space like others, and had no special powers. But they had something nobody expected. They were incredibly clever and never gave up. The Bright Empire reached Earth first. They met with human leaders and offered them advanced technology in exchange for help in the war. The humans agreed, but they did something unexpected. They studied every piece of technology they received and made it better. Within 1 year, humans had taken spaceships that could travel at light speed and made them go twice as fast. They looked at alien weapons that shot energy beams and created ones that could bend around corners. They even fixed problems in alien armor that nobody else had noticed. But the most surprising thing wasn't their technology improvements. It was how they fought. You see, Professor Blue continued, aliens fought wars in an organized way. We had rules, proper times for battles, and agreed upon ways of fighting. Humans didn't care about any of that. The professor showed another hologram, this time of a space battle. In their first major fight, 50 human ships faced 300 enemy vessels. The Dark Coalition thought it would be an easy win. They were wrong. The humans had filled asteroids with explosives and hidden them in the battle area. They used their faster ships to trick enemy vessels into the trap. When the explosives went off, they created a chain reaction that destroyed half the enemy fleet. But they weren't done. The humans had studied how alien shields worked and found out they couldn't stop very slow-moving objects. So they launched millions of small metal balls into space. These balls floated around until they hit enemy ships, going right through their shields and causing huge damage. The Dark Coalition lost that battle in less than an hour, Professor Blue said. No one had ever seen anything like it. The humans called it thinking outside the box. We called it terrifying. The students sat in silence, trying to imagine such a battle. A student with glowing spots asked, "But Professor, if they were so good at fighting, why ban them? Wouldn't everyone want human allies?" Professor Blue's color changed to a darker shade. That's the interesting part. Both sides tried to get humans to join them. The humans agreed, to both sides. The classroom buzzed with surprise. One student dropped their data pad. Yes, the professor continued. Humans played both sides against each other. They shared some technology with each side but kept the best for themselves. They learned the weaknesses of both armies. And then, when the two sides were weak from fighting each other, the humans did something that changed everything. The professor paused, all four eyes closed for a moment. They offered to make peace, but only if they could be in charge of keeping it. They showed both sides proof that they could destroy either army if they wanted to. And they promised to do exactly that if anyone started another war. That's why humans are banned from galactic wars, Professor Blue said. Not because they're weak. Not because they're primitive. But because they're too good at war. Too unpredictable. Too willing to do anything to win. A small alien in the back raised an appendage. But Professor, what happened next? Professor Blue smiled, showing his row of purple teeth. That, young ones, is what we'll learn in our next lesson. For now, remember this: never judge a species by how they look or what technology they have. Judge them by what they can learn, and what they're willing to do with that knowledge. The class bell rang, but none of the students moved. They were still thinking about the humans who had outsmarted the two most powerful forces in the galaxy. Read Chapter 7 in your books before next class, Professor Blue said. And remember, this is just the beginning of the story. Things get much more interesting from here. As the students finally started to leave, Professor Blue looked at the hologram of Earth still floating in the room. Such a small planet, he thought, that changed the galaxy in such a big way. The next day, Professor Blue's classroom was unusually full. Word had spread about his lesson on humans, and students from other classes had come to listen. Even a few teachers stood at the back of the room, pretending they weren't interested. Yesterday, Professor Blue said, his blue skin glowing slightly with excitement, we learned how humans entered the Galactic War. Today, we'll learn why even their allies began to fear them. He activated the hologram system, showing a massive space station. This was Station Peace, built by humans 5 years after they joined the war. They said it was for peace talks. They lied. The students leaned forward in their seats. Rock, the three-handed student from yesterday, looked nervous. The humans invited both the Bright Empire and Dark Coalition to send their leaders to the station. They promised to help end the war. Both sides were tired of fighting and agreed to come. The hologram changed to show hundreds of ships gathering near the station. On the day of the peace talks, something strange happened. The station's artificial gravity stopped working. Then the lights went out. When they came back on, every single weapon on every ship had stopped working. A student with crystal skin sparkled with surprise. How did they do that? Professor Blue's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. The humans had spent 5 years studying how every alien weapon worked. They built the station as one giant weapon-stopping machine. But that wasn't the clever part. He touched his desk screen, and the hologram showed the inside of the station. The humans had filled the station with simple machines, no electronics, no energy weapons. Just basic tools like pulleys, levers, and springs. Things that their technology-stopping field couldn't affect. When the leaders of both sides arrived, he continued, they found themselves trapped. Their advanced weapons didn't work, but the humans' simple machines worked perfectly. The humans had guards with basic metal crossbows and arrows. They had doors that worked with ropes and weights. They even had message systems using tubes of air. The classroom was silent. One of the teachers at the back dropped their datapad. The humans then did something that showed just how differently they thought, Professor Blue said. They forced both sides to sit down and watch videos. Videos? Asked a floating gas-form student. Of what? Of their own worlds being destroyed, Professor Blue said quietly. The humans had spent years making perfect computer models of how they could destroy any planet they wanted. They showed the leaders exactly how they would do it if the war continued. The professor paused, letting that sink in. They showed how they would use the sun's energy to burn worlds. How they would drop moons onto planets. How they would poison entire atmospheres. The humans had thought of thousands of ways to win, each one more terrible than the last. But that's just computer images, said Rock. They couldn't really do those things, right? Professor Blue changed the hologram to show a small moon. This was the moon of Planet 6 in the Dark Coalition. The humans asked permission to test one of their ideas. When they got permission, they made the moon vanish in 10 minutes. Gasps filled the room. Making a moon vanish was supposed to be impossible. They didn't actually make it vanish, the professor explained. They broke it into millions of pieces and sent those pieces into the sun. They did it to prove they weren't bluffing about their other plans. The professor walked slowly around his desk. The humans had a saying, peace through strength. But they changed it to peace through fear. They made everyone so afraid of what humans might do that nobody wanted to fight anymore. A small alien in the back raised a tentacle. Professor, why didn't both sides just team up and fight the humans together? Professor Blue smiled. An excellent question. The humans thought of that too. They had spent years building secret bases throughout the galaxy. They had hidden weapons everywhere. They told both sides that if anyone attacked Earth, automatic systems would activate and destroy 100 worlds. Were they telling the truth? Another student asked. Nobody wanted to find out, the professor replied. That was the scariest part about humans. You never knew if they were bluffing or not. They could be completely honest or totally lying, and they acted the same way either way. The professor showed a new hologram, a simple piece of paper with writing on it. This is the Galactic Peace Treaty. The humans wrote it in simple language that said 3 things. 1. All sides had to stop fighting. 2. Earth would lead the new Galactic Peace Force. 3. Humans would be banned from all future wars. But Professor, Rock said, why would humans ban themselves from wars if they were winning? Because, Professor Blue said, they didn't want to win the war. They wanted to end all wars. They knew that as long as they could fight, everyone would be scared of them. By banning themselves, they made everyone feel safer. But they kept their secret bases, their hidden weapons, and their plans, just in case. The professor looked at his students seriously. This is why studying humans is so important. They show us that the most dangerous weapon isn't the biggest gun or the strongest shield. It's the mind that can think of new ways to use old things. It's the ability to make your enemies defeat themselves. A soft bell chimed, signaling the end of class. But again, nobody moved. Before you leave, Professor Blue said, think about this, the humans ended a 25-year war in just 6 years. They did it without destroying a single planet, except for that one moon. They created peace by making war too frightening to consider. And they did it all with plans they hoped they would never have to use. The students finally started to pack up their things, talking quietly among themselves. Tomorrow, the professor called out, we'll learn about what happened when someone didn't believe the humans were serious about keeping the peace. It's a lesson that changed the galaxy forever, again. As the last students left, Professor Blue looked at the peace treaty hologram still floating in the air. Such simple words, he thought, that hid such complex threats. The humans had taught the galaxy that true power isn't about having the strongest weapons, it's about making sure you never need to use them. The third day of Professor Blue's lecture series on humans drew an even larger crowd. The classroom was so full that some students had to float near the ceiling. The anticipation in the room was almost electric. Professor Blue walked in, his blue skin slightly darker than usual, a sign of seriousness among his species. Yesterday, we learned how humans forced peace upon the galaxy. Today, we'll learn what happened when someone thought they could outsmart them. He activated the hologram, showing a beautiful purple planet with 3 rings. This was Storm World, home of the Thunder Empire. They weren't part of the original war, but they had watched everything that happened. They thought they had figured out the humans' weakness. The professor's 4 eyes narrowed. They thought humans were bluffing. A ripple of whispers went through the classroom. Even the floating students drifted lower to hear better. 10 years after the peace treaty, Professor Blue continued, the Thunder Empire decided to test their theory. They believed humans couldn't really destroy planets as easily as they claimed. They thought the moon demonstration was a trick. So they decided to start a small war, just to prove humans were lying. The hologram changed to show a fleet of ships with lightning bolt designs. They attacked 3 small trading posts near their space. When the Galactic Peace Force arrived to stop them, the Thunder Empire laughed. They said humans were weak, that their threats were empty. Rock raised one of his 3 hands. What did the humans do? Professor Blue touched his desk, and the hologram showed a single human ship. It was small, plain, and didn't look dangerous at all. They sent this. One ship. They called it the Teacher. It carried only 2 humans and a message. The classroom was completely silent now. Even the teachers at the back were leaning forward. The message was simple: you have 24 hours to surrender and join the peace treaty. If you refuse, we will teach you why the peace must be kept. The professor paused, his color shifting to a deeper blue. The Thunder Empire's leader sent back a message of his own. He said, "Come teach us, little humans. Show us these weapons you pretend to have." The humans sent back just 3 words, "Look up tonight." The hologram changed to show Storm World at night. Its 3 rings glowed beautifully in the starlight. That night, everyone on Storm World looked up at their rings, wondering what the humans would do. Some people laughed. Some worried. Most thought nothing would happen. Professor Blue's voice got very quiet. Then the first ring started to glow red. The hologram showed it happening, a beautiful but terrifying sight. The ring turned red like hot metal, then started to break apart. The humans had spent the last 10 years building tiny robots, millions of them, too small to see. They had hidden these robots in the rings of Storm World, just in case someone ever needed to learn this lesson. When activated, these tiny machines started eating the rings, turning them into energy. A student with glowing spots asked, "Did they destroy the whole ring?" "No," Professor Blue said. "They destroyed exactly 1/10 of the first ring. The machines ate through it in perfect lines, cutting it into pieces like a pie. Then they stopped." The hologram showed the damaged ring, now broken into precise sections, with gaps that spelled out words in the sky. 9 pieces remain. The message was clear, the professor continued. The humans could destroy the rest of the rings any time they wanted. They had proven they weren't bluffing, and they had turned Storm World's beautiful rings into a countdown timer. The classroom was so quiet you could hear the floating students' air sacs pumping. The Thunder Empire surrendered 2 hours later, Professor Blue said. But the humans weren't finished teaching their lesson. They left the broken ring exactly as it was, as a reminder. Even today, Storm World's first ring still has those gaps, spelling out its warning to anyone who looks up. The professor walked to the front of his desk. But the most frightening part wasn't what the humans did, it was what they revealed afterward. They announced that every planet in the galaxy with rings had similar machines hidden in them. Every asteroid belt, every debris field, could be turned into a weapon with a single command. They had spent 10 years preparing for someone to test them, he continued. 10 years placing tiny machines throughout the galaxy. 10 years making sure that if anyone ever doubted their commitment to peace, they could prove themselves instantly. A crystal student sparkled nervously. Are the machines still out there? Professor Blue's color shifted to a lighter blue. Nobody knows. The humans never told anyone how to find the machines. They never revealed how many there were or where they put them all. That's part of their strategy. The uncertainty makes everyone careful. But Professor, Rock asked, why go through all that trouble? Why not just destroy the Thunder Empire completely? Because, the professor said, humans understood something important about peace. It's not just about being able to win a war. It's about making sure everyone understands the cost of starting one. They didn't want to destroy Storm World, they wanted to teach everyone a lesson they would never forget. The bell chimed, but as usual, nobody moved. Tomorrow, Professor Blue said, we'll learn about the most interesting part of this story, what humans did with their power once they had it. Because sometimes, the way you keep peace is just as important as how you create it. As the students finally began to leave, many of them looked up at the ceiling, wondering if there were tiny machines hidden in their own world's rings, waiting quietly in the dark of space. Professor Blue watched them go, thinking about how humans had changed not just the galaxy's wars, but its very way of thinking about power. They had proved that the strongest weapon wasn't the one that could destroy the most, it was the one that could prevent destruction from ever happening in the first place. The fourth day of Professor Blue's lectures started with a surprise. The classroom had been rearranged into a circle, with the hologram projector in the center. Students found themselves looking at each other instead of just the professor. Today, Professor Blue said, standing in the middle of the circle, we'll learn the most surprising thing about humans. Not how they fought, not how they won, but how they kept the peace. The hologram showed Earth again, but this time surrounded by thousands of trading ships from different species. Everyone expected humans to become cruel rulers, the professor continued. They had the power to destroy worlds. They had hidden weapons everywhere. They could force anyone to do anything they wanted. But they did something nobody expected. He paused, looking around the circle of students. They became builders. The hologram changed to show a massive space station shaped like a wheel. This is Trade Ring 1, the first of 50 such stations humans built around the galaxy. They used their knowledge of alien technology to create places where different species could meet, trade, and learn from each other. Rock, sitting directly across from the professor, looked confused. But why build things? They already had power. Professor Blue smiled, his skin lightening to a cheerful shade. That's what everyone asked at first. The humans explained it with a simple phrase, peace needs a purpose. The hologram showed more stations, schools, and hospitals appearing across the galaxy. Humans understood that stopping war wasn't enough. People needed reasons to work together, to help each other. They turned their weapon factories into research centers. They used their military ships to explore new worlds. They taught other species how to make their own lives better. A floating student drifted lower. But didn't that mean giving away their advantages? The humans said something interesting about that, Professor Blue replied. The more people who know how to build, the fewer will choose to destroy. They believed that sharing knowledge was safer than keeping it secret. The hologram showed a school where young aliens of different species sat together, learning. They started exchange programs, sending human teachers across the galaxy and inviting alien students to Earth. They showed everyone how they thought, how they solved problems, how they came up with new ideas. But the most impressive thing, the professor continued, was how they handled disputes between worlds. The hologram changed to show two planets with a line drawn between them. When two worlds argued about territory, humans didn't threaten them. Instead, they offered to help both sides get what they needed. If two planets fought over mining rights, humans would help them find new resource deposits. If they argued over trade routes, humans would build new stations to help both sides. A crystal student sparkled with interest. Blue watched them go, thinking about how humans had proven that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, but turning them into a friend. They had shown that the most powerful force in the universe isn't the ability to destroy, but the willingness to build something new together. On the fifth day, Professor Blue's classroom remained in its circular arrangement, but the mood was different. The professor's skin had taken on a deep, serious blue as he stood in the center. Today, he began, we learn about the greatest challenge humans ever faced. Not a war. Not a rebellion. But a test of everything they believed in. The hologram showed a beautiful space station, one of the largest ever built. This was Hope Station, the crowning achievement of human peacekeeping efforts. It housed the Galactic Council, where representatives from all worlds met to solve problems together. It was a symbol of everything humans had built. The professor's voice grew quieter. And 30 years ago, someone tried to destroy it. The students leaned forward. Even the floating ones drifted closer to the ground. A group called the Shadow Hand had spent years planning in secret, Professor Blue continued. They believed the galaxy had grown weak under human guidance. They thought peace had made everyone soft. They wanted to bring back the old ways of war and conquest. The hologram showed dark ships gathering in secret locations. The Shadow Hand was made up of warriors from many different species. They had stolen weapons, built hidden bases, and planted spies everywhere. They thought they had found a way to beat the humans at their own game. Rock raised a hand. Did they find the humans' hidden weapons? Professor Blue's color darkened further. No. They found something they thought was more powerful. They found doubt. The hologram showed news reports from that time. Headlines questioned whether humans really had the weapons they claimed. Stories suggested the Thunder Empire incident was staged. Rumors spread that humans had lost control of their defense systems. The Shadow Hand spent years spreading these stories, the professor explained. They wanted everyone to stop trusting humans. They thought if people stopped believing in human power, the peace would break down by itself. A crystal student's light dimmed with concern. Did it work? At first, yes, Professor Blue said. Some worlds started building weapons again. Others demanded to inspect human facilities. Trust was breaking down. Then the Shadow Hand made their big move. The hologram showed Hope Station during a major meeting of the Galactic Council. They attacked during the largest gathering in the station's history. Representatives from 500 worlds were there. The Shadow Hand thought humans would have to either reveal their weapons or watch the station be destroyed. The professor paused, looking around the circle. The humans did neither. The hologram showed what happened next. As Shadow Hand ships approached the station, no weapons fired at them. No hidden defenses appeared. The humans simply evacuated everyone from the station, quickly and calmly. The Shadow Hand was confused, Professor Blue continued. This wasn't in their plan. They expected resistance. Instead, humans helped everyone escape, even as Shadow Hand ships surrounded the station. A student with multiple eyes blinked rapidly. But, why let them take the station? Professor Blue's color shifted slightly lighter. Because humans understood something the Shadow Hand didn't. Hope Station wasn't valuable because of its defenses or its location. It was valuable because of what it represented. The hologram showed the Shadow Hand forces entering the empty station. They found nothing. No weapons. No secret technology. Just meeting rooms, living quarters, and gardens. They had captured the most important station in the galaxy, and it gave them no power at all. But here's where humans proved why they were the perfect peacekeepers, the professor said. Instead of retaliating, they called for an emergency council meeting, on Earth. The hologram showed thousands of ships heading to Earth. Every species was invited. Even the Shadow Hand received an invitation. Humans opened their world to everyone, showing they had nothing to hide. At the meeting, Professor Blue continued, humans did something unprecedented. They revealed everything about their defense systems, not the locations, but how they worked. They showed that their power wasn't in hidden weapons, but in how they used knowledge itself as a defense. The professor walked slowly around the circle. They explained that Hope Station had no weapons because it didn't need them. Its real defense was that destroying it would unite the galaxy against anyone who tried. The Shadow Hand hadn't captured a weapon or a strategic location, they had captured a symbol that meant nothing without the trust it represented. A floating student drifted closer. What happened to the shadow hand? The humans offered them a choice, Professor Blue said. They could keep the station and try to rule through fear, or they could join the council and help build something better. To everyone's surprise, humans even offered to help them turn their military knowledge into something useful for peace, just as humans had done with their own war technology. The hologram showed Shadow Hand leaders sitting in the council on Earth, looking confused but intrigued. Most of the Shadow Hand members accepted, the professor said. They had prepared to fight humans with weapons, but they weren't prepared to fight humans with kindness. As one Shadow Hand leader later said, "How do you fight an enemy who turns your victory into an invitation to join them?" The professor's color returned to its normal blue. The crisis of trust actually made human leadership stronger. They proved that their power wasn't in weapons or threats, but in their ability to turn enemies into allies. They showed that true strength is being able to offer peace even when you have every right to seek revenge. The bell chimed, but the students remained seated. Tomorrow, Professor Blue said, we'll learn the final lesson about humans, how they turned the galaxy's ban on their warfare into the greatest opportunity for peace anyone had ever seen. As the students finally began to leave, many of them looked at the hologram of the council meeting on Earth, a moment when humans proved that the strongest defense isn't a weapon, but the trust you build with others. Professor Blue watched them go, thinking about how humans had faced their greatest challenge not with force, but with openness and understanding. They had shown that sometimes, the best way to defeat an enemy is to refuse to treat them like one. The sixth day of Professor Blue's lectures brought an air of anticipation. The circular classroom was now decorated with holograms of various human achievements, trade stations, schools, and peace monuments floating around the room's edges. Yesterday, Professor Blue began, his skin shimmering with excitement, we learned how humans handled the crisis of trust. Today, we'll learn about their greatest achievement, one that nobody saw coming. The central hologram showed a strange sight, a human teaching alien children how to plant trees. This, the professor said, is what humans call growing together. While everyone was watching for their next military move, humans were quietly spreading something far more powerful than any weapon. A student with crystal skin sparkled curiously. What were they spreading? Hope, Professor Blue answered. But not just any hope. They were teaching something they called the long view. The hologram changed to show a massive forest on an alien world. These trees were planted 50 years ago by the first human teachers. They knew they wouldn't live to see them grow full size. But they planted them anyway, teaching local children to care for them. Rock raised one of his 3 hands. But why plant trees that you'll never see grow? Professor Blue's color brightened. That's exactly the question humans wanted everyone to ask. They said that building lasting peace means doing things that will only show results long after you're gone. The hologram displayed various scenes, alien children learning human games, species that once fought now working together in labs, former enemies sharing meals in space stations. Humans had discovered something during their own history, the professor continued. The best way to prevent war isn't to threaten punishment, it's to make war seem pointless. They called it building shared futures. A floating student drifted closer. But how does planting trees stop wars? Think about it, Professor Blue said. If your children are studying with children from another world, if your scientists are working on projects that take decades to complete with scientists from former enemy planets, if your economy depends on trade stations that benefit everyone, who would want to destroy all that? The hologram showed a timeline of the galaxy since humans took charge of keeping peace. Trade had increased by 500%. Scientific discoveries had doubled. More species were working together than ever before. But here's the clever part, the professor said. Humans made sure they weren't the center of everything. They taught other species to build their own trade stations. They helped set up exchange programs between different worlds. They made themselves important but not essential. The professor walked around the circle. They had learned from their own history that peace enforced by one power never lasts. But peace built by everyone working together? That's much harder to break. A student with multiple eyes blinked thoughtfully. Is that why they're still banned from wars? Because they're too busy building things? Professor Blue's color shifted to a deep, wise blue. They're banned from wars because everyone finally understood what humans knew all along, that they were never really building trade stations, schools, or gardens. They were building connections. Connections so strong that breaking them would hurt everyone involved. The hologram showed a graduation ceremony at a human-founded school. Look at this carefully, the professor said. The teacher is human. The students are from 15 different species. But notice what they're all wearing? The students looked closer. Each graduate wore a pin that showed their home world linked with other worlds. These pins are made from metals mined on one world, shaped on another, decorated on a third. Every piece requires cooperation between different species. Humans designed them that way on purpose. Professor Blue touched his desk, and the hologram zoomed out to show hundreds of similar ceremonies across the galaxy. They created thousands of small links like this. Each one seems simple, but together they form a web that holds our civilization together. But Professor, Rock asked, what happens when humans eventually leave? Won't it all fall apart? The professor's color brightened considerably. That's the most brilliant part. Humans made sure everything they built could work without them. They taught others how to teach. They showed different species how to solve problems together. They turned their ideas into galaxy-wide habits. The hologram showed the current Galactic Council, where representatives from hundreds of worlds worked together. Humans were there, but only as advisors. This is their real victory, Professor Blue said. Not that they stopped wars with threats, but that they made peace more profitable than conflict. Not that they forced cooperation, but that they made working together feel natural. A quiet student in the corner finally spoke up. But they still have their hidden weapons, right? Their secret defenses? Professor Blue's color shifted to something between amused and impressed. Maybe. Maybe not. That uncertainty was part of their plan too. But ask yourself, if everyone is better off with peace, if trade and cooperation are making all worlds richer and safer, if our children are growing up together, do those weapons even matter anymore? The bell chimed, but as had become tradition, no one moved. Tomorrow, the professor said, we'll learn the final secret about humans. The real reason they're banned from wars, and why they're perfectly happy about it. As the students prepared to leave, many of them touched the graduation pins they now wore themselves, thinking about all the worlds that had cooperated to create these small symbols of unity. Professor Blue watched them go, thinking about how humans had pulled off the greatest trick in galaxy history. They hadn't just stopped wars, they had made peace itself an unstoppable force. They had turned their ban from warfare into an opportunity to build something far more powerful than any weapon, a future where war seemed like a stupid choice compared to working together. On the last day of Professor Blue's lectures, the classroom was more than full. Students sat on the floor, floated near the ceiling, and even crowded in the doorway. The circular arrangement remained, but now it felt like a gathering of friends rather than a class. Professor Blue stood in the center, his skin glowing with a warm, bright blue. Today, he said, we learn the real reason humans are banned from wars. It's not what anyone expected when the ban was first made. The hologram showed the original peace treaty floating in the air. Everyone thought this ban was a punishment for humans, or a way to control their power. Even humans pretended to accept it as a limitation. The professor smiled. But they had planned it all along. A wave of surprise moved through the classroom. Rock nearly dropped his datapad. You see, Professor Blue continued, humans knew something about themselves that no other species understood. They knew they were too good at fighting, too clever at finding new ways to win. They knew that if they stayed involved in wars, they would keep making deadlier weapons, finding scarier ways to win. The hologram showed scenes from human history, their own wars, their own peace treaties. They had learned from their past that having the power to win every fight didn't make them happy. It didn't make them safe. It just meant everyone was afraid of them. A crystal student sparkled with revelation. So they banned themselves? Exactly. Professor Blue's color brightened even more. They wrote the treaty in a way that made it look like others were limiting their power. But really, they were giving themselves permission to become something else. The hologram changed to show human scientists teaching alien children, human engineers building homes on damaged worlds, human doctors treating species they had never seen before. They turned their war-making cleverness into problem-solving creativity. They changed their tactical thinking into planning for peace. They used their understanding of weapons to build better tools for living. The professor moved slowly around the circle. But here's the most clever part, they made sure the ban could never be lifted. Because they knew that someday, someone might ask them to fight again. The ban gives them the perfect excuse to say no. A floating student drifted thoughtfully. So they trapped themselves into being peaceful? Not trapped, Professor Blue corrected. They freed themselves. Free to build instead of destroy. Free to help instead of hurt. Free to turn their most dangerous talents into their most helpful ones. The hologram showed current images from around the galaxy, hundreds of species living and working together, trade routes bustling with activity, new discoveries being made by joint research teams. Look at what they've built, the professor said. The galaxy's longest peace. The most prosperous trade network. The biggest exchange of knowledge in history. And they did it all because they chose to be banned from what they were best at, fighting. Rock raised his hand one last time. But Professor, what happens if a real war starts? What if we really need humans to fight? Professor Blue's color shifted to a deep, wise blue. That's the final lesson about humans. They made sure we would never need them to fight again. They taught us all how to solve problems without violence. They showed us that working together makes us stronger than fighting each other. The hologram showed one final image, Earth, small and blue, floating in space. Humans knew that true power isn't in having the strongest weapons or the scariest threats. True power is in being able to choose what you become. They chose to become teachers instead of warriors, builders instead of destroyers, friends instead of enemies. The professor looked around at all his students. So remember this, humans aren't banned from wars because they're dangerous. They're banned because they found a better way to live. And they spent 50 years teaching that better way to every species in the galaxy. The bell chimed for the last time, but nobody moved. One more thing, Professor Blue said softly. Look at your graduation pins again. The students touched the pins they wore, the ones showing connected worlds. The design for those pins came from human children, not their leaders. While adults were writing peace treaties, human children were drawing pictures of different worlds holding hands. That's when humans knew their plan would work, because their children already understood what the adults were only beginning to learn. As the students finally began to leave, they looked different than they had a week ago. They stood taller, spoke more kindly to each other, looked at their world with newer, wider eyes. Professor Blue watched them go, knowing they had learned the greatest lesson humans had to teach, that the strongest power in the universe isn't the ability to win every fight, it's the wisdom to make fighting unnecessary. And somewhere out there, human teachers were starting another class, planting another garden, building another bridge between worlds, quietly proud of the war they had won by choosing never to fight again.